working towards that bust out. They're going to max everything, make some fraudulent purchases, and walk away. Sometimes they catch them, sometimes they don't.
We're not just talking about fake IDs. These people are making dozens of identities all simultaneously and spending time and letting those things nurture and build to this ultimate cash out.
You're capturing driver's licenses today. Validate. That will find the fraud. You also want to push that barrier that you're fighting fraud up as early on in your process as you can.
Welcome to the 700 Credit Podcast, the future of automotive finance, compliance, identity verification, and smarter dealership processes. Let's get into it.
Hey, what's going on, Automotive Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the 700 Credit Podcast. This is going to be your front row seat to conversations that are shaping the future of automotive finance, compliance, and identity verification. Hosted by myself and some great experts over at 700 Credit, each episode is going to dive into real-world dealership challenges, from fraud prevention and soft pull strategies to compliance pitfalls. I know, all the fun stuff, right? Whether you're an F&I, whether you're in the F&I office or running a BDC or leading your dealership, this podcast gives you the insights, stories, and tools to protect your dealership and improve your deal flow. Guys, I have a great guest with me. I have the man, the myth, the legend himself. All right, I got Ken Hill with me. Ken, how you doing, man?
Good. Thanks, Jason. We gotta work on your intro of me.
You know what? I Ken, you deserve every minute of that. Okay. I know you're like, oh, I don't know about that intro. I'm like, look, Ken, you've been in this business for such a long time, helping dealers. You're so passionate about this industry. You're so humble about it. So you can let me brag just a little, if that's okay. I'm just gonna brag for you. Okay, guys, I'm serious. Ken is one of the legit OGs in this business and cares so much about this industry. And we got some great topics. But hey, real quick, Ken, for everybody out there watching and listening right now, who maybe don't know who you are, and why you're the OG, just give me like a quick little origin story of how you got started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry.
Okay, thank you. I got started in credit first, actually, programming FICO scorecards from manual, and then I went to work for a company that sold credit and solutions across all industries. And then I went from that to really, I wanted to be industry focused in order to really zero in on problems and solutions. And I made the move to automotive, and it's been a lot of fun. And now, right, we're working on credit and identity verification type solutions for dealers to fight some of the problems that they're having inside the dealership.
Well, guys, he's a modest person. What can I say? Ken has been here in our industry for a long time and has really committed to solving some of the biggest blind spots in our industry, and honestly, doing it for close to 20,000 rooftops, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah.
20.
Yes, 20,000. Yeah.
Just a few. Okay, Ken. Today's topic. This topic hits me a little personally, and I'm going to get into it because I was affected by this in a pretty big way, a little bit of trauma, but that's okay. But I want to get into this because the name of today's episode is Fraud at the Door: How to Spot It Before It Costs You. And I've dealt with fraud in my time in the industry, both from a salesperson, as a manager, and even as an operator, where I had to deal with court hearings and other pains in my butt, all right, because of fraud. And again, we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. This really is people and process and technology issue that has to be solved, and it can create some pretty big impacts at our dealership. So let's start with this, Ken. The rise in synthetic identity fraud and how it hits dealerships. I know. Let's start there. And I know there's a few other pieces of fraud too. So let's actually let's do this. Let's start with like what is synthetic identity fraud, and what are some other uh, frauds that are out there right now?
Well, there's synthetic fraud, which is actually a synthetic identity that the fraudster has created, and that some of the traditional fraud fighting tools don't catch it. Some of the older ones, right? The original fraud was identity theft, where a fraudster just tried to purchase a vehicle with someone else's identity.
Sure.
And there some solutions were put in place that really curbed that. Red flag regulation by the government helped curb that, making sure that that consumer, that person sitting in front of you, was who they said they were. But then the fraudsters took it up another level to synthetic fraud. And now we're getting into first party fraud, which is a different type of fraud as well. But synthetic fraud, right? The fraudsters, they're patient. They spend years creating these identities, and typically they're creating multiple, and a lot of them have been related to gangs and multiple people creating multiple identities.
Sure.
And they build credit. They build a credit file, and they actually, open credit lines, credit cards, and until they're working towards the bust out. And the bust out is when they're going to walk away from everything. Right before the bust out, they'll max all their credit lines.
Sure.
And then they'll go to make big purchases. And unfortunately for automotive, vehicles are the number one target for those big purchases. So
Makes sense. Easy to move. I can navigate. I can put them in a container, get them out of the way real quick. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's really critical that we have a front line of defense to try and catch all these different types of fraud. And synthetic, there's a lot of tools that can be used to stop synthetic fraud. The fraudster starts to create his synthetic identity by maybe just goes on Cap One, or not to pick on Cap One, but any credit cards.
I know Apple cards, like Apple
cards, right?
Because it's an easy one. It's an easy one to start with. I know that's becoming popular right now.
Yeah, but basically they take information, a valid social security number, someone else's name and address, different address, right? They compile this information, and then they fill out an application that's online, right? And to apply for credit. And the first thing that the credit bureaus do is, right, they take that information, they search for a file in their system. Naturally, they're not going to find it. So the policies are, if I can't find it, create it. So they create the file with that false information, and that establishes that credit file. Typically, now they got to start building it. Typically, to build it, they'll pay a consumer with good payment history to add that fraud identity, that fraudster's identity, as a authorized user of their credit card.
Sure. So now they're starting to really build up themselves, guys. I want to keep going down this, but guys, for everybody, real quick, for everybody out there watching, listening, we're not just talking about fake IDs anymore, guys. Like this is some serious time and money invested, and a real strategy here. I mean, to Ken's point, guys, these people are making dozens of identities all simultaneously and spending time and letting those things nurture and build to this ultimate cash out. Ken, please continue, because I find this super fascinating.
Yeah. Well, the authorized user, like I added my children before they went away to college as authorized user on my credit cards.
Sure.
So, right, first of all, if they needed something, an emergency, they had that. But it also builds their credit file, right? Because my payment history, my credit limit, all of that is not only on my credit file, now it's on my child's, or in this case, the fraudster's fraudulent ID, right? So that as you continue to use it and the consumer continues to pay it, or I pay it, my child's credit score increases because they're receiving that good credit behavior, that good credit history. And then once the fraudster establishes that he has an account on his file, now he can actually use that false identity and go pay for credit lines, low volume credit lines, maybe, and good behavior over time, increase those credit lines, credit cards, increase, right? And so that's why they're so patient. It takes time to build that file. And again, they're working towards that bust out where they're going to max everything, make some fraudulent purchases, and walk away. And sometimes they catch them, sometimes they don't.
And I mean, I can't imagine that moment of cash out's gotta be huge. I mean, it's gotta be several hundred thousands of dollars, between
It is.
credits, purchases. I mean, and it makes sense why cars. I mean, this really does make sense because I'm thinking just, in the deal booking process and the time of just getting the banks. There's a moment, and I don't think consumers don't know this, right? Like, I mean, we book the deal, we let it roll. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the F&I office as an F&I manager, like I came to my manager and not everything was totally buttoned up, and it was a well, let it roll situation, and
hope.
like
Golf term, right? Hit and hope. You hit the
Right.
ball, don't know where it's going. You just hope. They sell it. They don't want to lose that sell. They sell it and hope that that deal doesn't go bad, right? And they won't. You don't know for 30, 60 days that deal's bad. So
Well,
where's
that's
the
what I'm saying.
card now?
It's that time. Like, I mean, between me getting all of the documents to the bank. Now I know some things have gotten faster over the years, but still, I mean, just and then of course, just for me as a dealer to get funded on that piece of inventory, right? Like, there's a lot of liabilities that can be created through just kind of a lack of process. In fact, actually, that's a perfect segue kind of into what I want to talk about next, because now I wanted to get into the tools and processes that flag fraud before the deal is written. Do you hear that? Before the deal is written. Oh, sorry, Ken. Anyways, can you elaborate on some of the tools and processes?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's really a philosophy is right. Get to know your customer.
Mm.
Right. Get to know them. Certainly, tools like Red Flag help to verify that name and address is on file. You can do out of wallet questions that you can ask the consumer that only they would know the answers to. The problem with some of those solutions, like with synthetic fraud, they don't work, right? It's
Sure.
sort of a valid credit file and generating valid questions. They're going to know where the addresses or credit cards that they have, that type of thing. So we did a webinar probably 2-3 years ago with the fraud experts from the credit bureaus, and they came out. They have a fraudulent. All of them have a synthetic fraud credit score. If you don't have one of those, add it. It's not very expensive. You're talking a quarter to add a synthetic fraud score, and that looks at the behavior. There's like 26 factors in those scores and their secret sauce where they're looking at the history of that credit file and looking for indicators that would indicate that this could be a synthetic identity, right? That
Because there's certain patterns, right?
they're patterns, right? And they're looking for various patterns. So, that's one thing. That's an easy add, easy fix. The other, all the experts had a variation of this get to know your customer, but the one common theme with each of the experts was you're capturing driver's licenses today. Validate them. That will find the fraud, right? And that will, point out the fraudsters through your validation of the license. That's a valid document. Validate the identity behind that document. Bounce it off the DMV to ensure that's a license that's registered at the
Real.
DMV, right? And it matches the person that's applying for that loan. So if everyone stated that they thought the number one tool, right? You're already capturing the license today. Why not capture it and validate it? And it's remote deals, right? Send a link to a consumer that's doing a remote deal and have them take a picture of the license, both sides, and a selfie, right? A lot of fraud stops the minute you send that link because, I don't want my picture.
Actually have to identify.
Yeah, with the driver's license. So, putting up that barrier of fraud. And you also want to push that barrier that you're fighting fraud up as early on in your process as you can. We have some dealerships that you can't enter a record in the CRM until you validate their license and capture their license.
I like that process.
Right? Yeah, can't go for a test drive without grabbing the license and validating. So, it's a good, as I mentioned, a barrier to help fight the fraud. And as I mentioned, you're capturing the license anyways. Why not change how you're capturing it and storing it for that matter?
And to your point, Ken, we're not talking about a huge investment here. All right. But we're talking things that not only affects the customer experience, but also the staff experience. Ken, I know I've shared this story with you, and maybe some of you out there watching and listening have maybe heard this story before. But when I was a young salesperson, I had a vehicle stolen from me on a test drive. And it was, the funny thing is that the person came in, um, a perfect story, working for a certain company that was just up the road. We have sold many, many cars to people that have moved into the area who started working at this company. None of this was uncommon. Everything was, in fact, what the funny thing is, he even had a badge. Like, I mean, just how smart, right? And this was years and years ago. This was over 20 years ago, right? Even had a badge for the company itself, right? Gave us a driver's license. We did what everybody did back then, took a photocopy of it, whoop, went on a test drive. Got about 8-10 miles from the dealership when he decided to pull over. I thought there was something wrong. Maybe there was car was vibrating or something like that. He pulled out a gun and told me to get out. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to argue. I'm not arguing with you. Sure, whatever. Not worth my life. You take the car. And the car was gone, never to be seen. And what was unfortunate is that I ended up having to walk 4 miles just to the nearest exit on the highway because they didn't have my cell phone. Back then, we didn't carry cell phones with us all the time. In fact, actually, I remember the dealerships encouraging you not to carry your cell phones with you because you didn't want to interrupt the process. But man, this was a scary experience. And I just think about what you just talked about, Ken, on just how, just this very small investment would have eliminated that. But to your point, like the fraudsters are getting smarter. There are they're getting higher and just spending again a little extra investment to identify the synthetic style, which is look, okay, they're smart, they're building the patterns. Look, I know we're getting towards the tail end of our conversation, but I want to ask you this because I wish somebody may have asked my desking manager these questions at one point. But what does every desk or F&I manager need to know, but often don't know when it comes to fraud?
I would say the multiple kinds of fraud and the various first party fraud right now is something that we're seeing on the rise. Synthetic fraud is still on the rise. First party fraud, right? These consumers, they're performing credit washing on their credit file, bringing up their score as high as they can, and then go into a dealership and buy a car with no intention of ever paying. So they're out there. Your dealership, I forget our survey numbers, but it was like the average dealership experiences at least one fraud case. Majority experience multiple a month of
Wow.
fraudsters trying to steal a vehicle. So, and the other, they like the off the beaten path dealerships, right?
Okay.
And so if you don't have some form of identity verification, I would encourage you to do it, and especially if you've had experience with fraud, to validate that license. The other piece is too, you got to start thinking about, are you still using paper deal jackets versus electronic deal jackets? You don't want to. Those are a thing of the past. So, validating that driver's license can also accomplish a second thing, and that is taking the images and putting it into your deal jacket without your store employees. One quick story that I did here a couple of months ago is that somebody broke into a dealership and they were trying to figure out, what did they take? Finally figured out they took paper deal jackets and they used the contents of the deal jackets to steal the identities.
It was worth more than the cars.
It was worth more than the cars. Yeah. So.
Well, hey, look, guys, maybe it's the inner Boy Scout coming out in me, but I think you guys can tell from this podcast, the overall theme is to be prepared. And, that is literally talking to your people, educating them, showing them this episode. Make sure that they know kind of what the different forms of fraud are out there, right? Secondly, you got to put a process together. All right. You need to have a process both for your salespeople, from the front to the back. There needs to be a process so that we can identify these. And third, you got to make sure that you have the technology that can quickly identify these fraudsters and ultimately save you guys a ton of money. And your customers will thank you for it. And honestly, your salespeople, and this is coming from someone who's been literally in those shoes, will thank you for it as well. Hey, Ken, real quick, before I let you go, for everybody out there watching and listening, we'd love to learn more. What's the website? Where do they learn more?
700credit.com. And
all right.
Email addresses, phone numbers there, but or call your rep if you have an existing relationship, right? And with 700, be happy to talk to you about your options and solutions.
Awesome. Hey, for everybody out there watching and listening, we appreciate you. If you guys enjoyed this episode and like to see more episodes like this, again, go to 700credit.com, look for the little podcast button, and you can check out some of the additional episodes. Look, one of the biggest compliments you can give us as content creators is to share the show, right? If you have a manager or a colleague that needs to see some portion of today's conversation, it means a lot to us when you share the show. Ken, thank you so much for your time. And for everybody out there watching and listening, we appreciate you. Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the 700 Credit Podcast. Tighten your process, protect your deals. See you in the next episode.